Welcome to another day in Biden's America. Isn't it awesome? In El Paso, a group of more than 100 illegals must have gotten tired of waiting around. They stormed the border. Footage taken by the New York Post shows illegal aliens ripping down barbed wire fencing and overtaking members of the Texas National Guard before they tried to force their way through another barrier. Joining us now is Lieutenant Chris Olivares, Texas Department of Public Safety spokesman. Chris, you say some of these Texas soldiers were injured. What can you tell us tonight?
Right, Laura. So, I don't know what more of an example we need to clearly show and justify that we have an invasion on our border than what you're seeing in that video right now. I mean, right now, this happened earlier this morning in El Paso, approximately 600 illegal immigrants. Majority were from Venezuela, and majority were single adult men that were in that group that actually contributed to breaching those physical barriers and getting across unlawfully, complete disrespect for our laws in Texas, complete disrespect for the sovereignty of our state, and most important, disrespect for our soldiers and troopers that are on the front lines. Several soldiers were assaulted. We did make several arrests for that, and there is more arrests and more charges to come. But that clearly shows, Laura, that we need to have consequences. We need to hold people accountable that are breaking the law. And this is another example of how House Senate Bill 4 would have been proven to be effective. We would have had the authority now to arrest every single person that unlawfully crossed at that particular moment.
I mean, the fact that this is happening in the United States of America is just, I mean, how anyone could think this was okay, it's beyond me. And at this point, I think Americans are watching this and saying, how do you hold this type of crowd back? I mean, what if it's 500 people? I mean, we don't shoot people coming into our country. We don't shoot people. That's not who we are as a country. But if people think that they can get away with it, are you going to be able to arrest 1,000 people if they show up? What next?
That's a challenge that we've been facing for the last 3 years in Texas because of the fact that we have to take on this responsibility because the federal government refuses to enforce the laws that are on the books, and they refuse to protect our law enforcement officers by adding consequences to these type of situations. Right there, you had over 600 that completely just breached those physical barriers that were placed by the National Guard, overtaking our soldiers and assaulting our soldiers. Really shows the type of situations that our soldiers are dealing with and our troopers are dealing with every single day by being on the front lines. It clearly shows also that when you have hundreds and even thousands coming across, it's even more challenging. How are we going to stop that many people coming across the border when we don't have all the resources, especially federal resources? Exactly.
I mean, this is an invasion. I mean, there's no other way to describe it. I mean, the soldiers, what if they even defend themselves? There will be some viral video that, just like they did with the horse whipping, that fake video. There'll be some viral video, and that poor soldier have his life turned upside down. That's what I bet these guys are thinking on the front lines there, because they're going to say it's not worth it. My life being turned, my family's life being turned upside down. Suddenly, I'm the bad guy for helping enforce the border because Biden wants all these people in. Does he not?
Well, absolutely. Of course, it puts our soldiers and even our troopers in a predicament now, right? Because now, of course, we are facing this criticism and attacks by the federal government with lawsuits and threatening to, press charges on our troopers and our soldiers for enforcing our laws. It clearly shows how there is a lack of leadership and a lack of responsibility at the federal level where they don't want to enforce the laws that are on the books right now. We're having to take on this responsibility, which we've been doing for the last 3 years. And now going into this year, it's going to be much more difficult. That's why we need consequences. We need to have laws in place so we can prevent situations like this.
Chris, thank you so much. Great to see you. All right, joining me now, Vivek Ramaswamy, former candidate for president. Vivek, we were going to do a different topic with you, but I found this to be so disturbing on so many levels tonight. I think we have to talk about this. Right now, we have a country in which Americans on January 6th were, they were targeted. People who weren't even in the Capitol were targeted. And, various charges brought, many of them unfair, long periods of solitary confinement. And yet illegal aliens can do this at our southern border, injure our soldiers, far as I can tell, Biden's Justice Department is just yawning, and the DHS, they don't care.
Well, look, Laura, it's not just that Biden is failing to stop this invasion. The Biden administration and Mayorkas's DHS are creating the incentives for this invasion. The fact that Texas has to step up and stop something that the federal government isn't reveals how broken this system is. And I do think that Texas has called the legal bluff of the federal government. You can't have a Biden administration that on one hand says that they are enforcing the laws just as Texas is, but then says that somehow Texas's policy contradicts that of the federal government when Texas is exactly doing what the federal government should have. You can't talk out of both sides of your mouth. And so the reality is I think this is going to unite independents across this country. This should not be a partisan issue. An open border is not a border. A nation without borders is not a nation. And the fact that you have a federal government that's turning homeland security and justice threat issues out of so-called domestic terrorists, when in fact we have a real invasion of a foreign threat at our own southern border, is something that most independents in this country understand does not make sense and want to put an end to. And so sad as it is, I do think that this is an opportunity for the Republicans to build a much larger coalition to win this election in a decisive landslide. And I think that's what's coming.
The question, Vivek, is whether the video that we're showing on screen right now is going to be seen by a significant portion of the voting public. That's another issue, is it not, with social media and, you know, the censors that they'll claim they're not censors and all of that. But it'll be on the New York Post website, obviously on Fox, a few other outlets. But most of the majors, they don't want to dwell on this. This is not good for them, just like the Biden plan to destroy the suburbs with all these changes in zoning laws that they're going to force on localities. They don't want those suburban women hearing that story either.
So look, this is the ultimate challenge of free and fair elections in this country, is the distribution of information, both through the channels of mainstream left-leaning media, but also with big tech censorship. I do think, though, Laura, people understand we have learned that lesson before. Look at what they did in 2016. Look at what they did in 2020. And I think most people in this country are attuned to the fact that they have been lied to systematically by the media. I thought that video was alarming when I saw it. I had the same thought that you did. If every American saw this, we would understand the state of what is really an open border at our southern border. That doesn't look like a porous border. It looks like a non-existent one. But what I see traveling across this country is that many people are hungry now to search for sources of information that are different from what they found. Now we have Twitter, owned by a new owner, run as X. So I think we have seen progress that is going to make a difference this year. That doesn't mean we aren't up against significant forces. Look at Google changing the definition of bloodbath, coming out of its search engine. They're tilting the scales. But I think people are smart to that reality this time around.
This looks like that air base in Afghanistan at one point. I wasn't paying attention, and I looked over. I thought it was more video that we hadn't seen before from Afghanistan. That's the United States of America, folks. Vivek, thank you. Great to see you tonight, as always.
I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard.
It's not about justice, it's not about agenda, it's not about mobilizing people, it's about dialing for corporate dollars. These two parties have sold the U.S. government and the American people to the highest bidders.